Mini episode 1271 of the FDH Lounge is brought to you by Sportsology, delivering unconventional columns and webcasts about sports, TV, music, movies, and more. Follow them on the web at sportsology.com.
The FDH Lounge. You'll want to schedule your life around it.
A long time ago, on a gloomy, wet Cleveland spring night, two men stand alone amidst the late-night drizzle. Their voices echo across the vacant station parking lot as they debate the merits of the great American radio show that have been missing for far too long. On that night, an idea was born. That idea became the FDH Lounge. Welcome to the FDH Lounge.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the FDH Lounge. This is FDH Managing Partner Rick Morris here. I am here with fellow original FDH Lounge dignitary Chris Galloway. It's that time of year again. We are going through the NFL division by division. Today we are taking a look at, this is part 5 in our series of divisional previews, the NFC East for the year 2020. And standard kind of disclaimer at the top here, I'm going to refer everybody back to the first part of our series, which was on the AFC East. We did about 10 minutes or so on the general COVID situation for this year, the things that are going to make this season unique. From there, all we're doing is looking at how it affects some of the teams as we go along. We've done that already. I don't know that we're going to have any here in the NFC East that will say that it affects, maybe not. I don't know. I have a sense on maybe one or two of these teams potentially. But Chris Galloway, when I look at the NFC East, I see, quite frankly, a lot of continuity from last year. I see two teams in this division that are certainly playoff caliber and two teams that most definitely are not.
Rick, let me just say, how about them Cowboys?
I knew that was coming.
I agree with you on that point. In this case, I'm going to pick those Cowboys to be marginally better than mediocre and win the East, followed by the slightly marginally less mediocre Eagles, and then the awful Giants and awful Redskins. So, in that order. And although it's possible, although I don't think so, the Skins could jump the Giants, but I don't believe that's going to happen this year.
Well, I've got them just about equally awful. My order at the top of the division is flip-flopped from yours, but I'll defer to your order of finish here. So let's start with the Cowboys. I got them at 9-7. I'm guessing you probably have them for at least slightly better than that. You've got an offense with a lot of skill position talent. You add CeeDee Lamb to the mix, which was a very interesting and I would say shocking first-round pick. I can still remember the way that we reacted to that the night of the draft when you and I were doing the Facebook Live session there. That was a little bit surprising, but again, really kind of, this is something that I've talked about teams doing before, and the Cowboys did it previously. I was a big proponent of them drafting Ezekiel Elliott back when people said, well, why would you do that? You already have the best offensive line in the league. Anybody can get 1,000 yards back there. And my thing is like, yeah, but not everybody can get 2,000 yards back there. The Cowboys, the one thing I will say is they do a thing, not all the time, but this is the second time I can remember it in recent years, weaponizing a position where you are already strong so that you can be truly elite at that position and a real matchup problem for other teams.
Well, that's exactly what they did. And, you know, you're Jerry Jones and you're sitting there on your yacht on the draft night, you know, and CeeDee Lamb falls to you, and even though in your head you were thinking you were taking a cornerback, who, by the way, that secondary guy you got in the next round, so it didn't matter.
Right.
The people thought you were going to take him in the first round, you took him in the second round, and you got an explosive dynamic receiver in CeeDee Lamb to go with Amari Cooper and to go with Michael Gallup, who is emerging. To your point, it's potentially the best three-man tandem wide receiving core in the league. If CeeDee Lamb lives up to what we think he could be, he could be a OBJ type wide receiver. And if you're the Cowboys, you just got to do it. You just take talent. You've got Zeke. You've got Dak Prescott signed on his tender offer on the since they couldn't come up with a contract on him, so he's playing for big money still. And I think you put them into a better offensive system under Mike McCarthy than what you had with Jason Garrett. And I think the Cowboys are going to enjoy a little bump in the change of scenery at coach. The new discipline that's showing up in the offseason this year with the Cowboys. It's Jason Garrett is a wonderfully nice man, but he was a doormat for those players. And they stepped all over him and wiped their feet with him. And Mike McCarthy's coming in. He's instilling some discipline. And I'm not a big Mike McCarthy fan, but you and I both know that initially these things can work for a time. In terms of getting players' attention, snapping them, getting them to buy into the new system. It's certainly the one that's going to be vertically oriented. Prescott has shown that's fine in terms of the passing game and his ability. And as long as they're doing that, it's going to open up lanes for Ezekiel Elliott to be a dominant again. So offensively, this Cowboys team is loaded. And there's no reason why, they won't go into any game thinking they can't score enough points to win a game. So from that standpoint, they're going to be competitive week in and week out offensively. Even getting a backup, kind of like what Cleveland did with Case Keenum, getting a good backup in Andy Dalton, if God forbid something happens to Dak Prescott, and you've got another guy who can step right in, and they won't miss a beat, I think, for the most part. Because we all know that, the Red Rocket there, or whatever his nickname was in Cincinnati, he had his high, he had some great moments. They just couldn't win in playoffs, but I don't think you worry about Andy Dalton if he's got to start for you for 3 or 4 weeks, worst case scenario, that you're going to have, any issues on that front. So I think Dallas has put themselves in a position to have the best offense in the division by far. Defensively, they're hurting. I mean, losing Gerald McCoy after you signed him, even though he's Gerald McCoy on the downward slope of his career, he's still, a great presence in the middle of that line. Losing him was a real blow. They've got the great linebackers. I think the question mark is, being that today they cut Clinton Dix, are they going to go after the player from Baltimore? Are they going to go after him and try to sign him? I would guess that they probably, Earl Thomas, I would guess that that's probably what they're going to do by freeing up that money that they were spending on Dix. So defensively, they've got a lot of question marks, but they do have talent on that side of the ball. They do have the ability from time to time to, play a good defensive game. So that's why I picked the Cowboys number one. Combined with the fact that, frankly, Rick, I just think there are too many question marks on the Eagles' side of that ledger. I think the Eagles have more question marks right now than the Cowboys.
They may very well. On the Cowboys, just a couple of follow-up points there. This has been really one of the issues with them the last couple of years is depth on their defense. They always manage to have, it almost seems like a certain number of really standout starters, 3, 4, 5, but they never really kind of get over that point, and they never really seem to have that much, depth across even their starting unit here. And part of this is because of their cap issues over the years and the money that they are assigning to some of their higher payroll players, which has really complicated, retaining all of the offensive skill position players. And offensively, when you look at Mike McCarthy, this is a thing where I think the best case scenario for Cowboy fans, I know you kind of disagreed with me a little bit when we were going through the AFC West on what I said about Andy Reid, about how I felt like he sort of got a second wind coaching-wise in Kansas City. But some of the tactics I saw there, and some of the things, was his reputation as a choker overblown in Philadelphia? Yeah, probably. But, I mean, I really do think that this is the best version of Andy Reid we've ever seen. And, yeah, Patrick Mahomes has a lot to do with it. But like I said, the play calling that he did in the Super Bowl of where they basically did rope-a-dope for 3 quarters until unleashing Patrick Mahomes in the 4th quarter, I thought was brilliant. And if you're a Cowboy fan, that's what you got to be looking at, and you got to be hoping happens here, because we've heard all these stories. Mike McCarthy, he took his year away from the game. He said, okay, fair enough. I'm a guy that needs to get with the 21st century, and he's a bright guy. There's nothing that says that he can't do it. If you're a Cowboy fan, you got to be hoping that he pulled it off successfully, and that, like with Andy Reid, the second version of him is really well suited for today's game.
I don't know if you caught this the other day. The Cowboys, like a lot of teams, had a intra-team scrimmage at the stadium.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it was, put on like Facebook and social media, and you could watch it if you were a Cowboys fan on the Blue Star Network. And McCarthy did something really interesting that I thought was actually brilliant, and that was he basically took the numbers and the names off all the players.
Okay.
Their jerseys when they played. So unless you knew who they are by just looking at them physically in their uniform, if you were the opposing team, you're the other side in the division, trying to watch their game a little bit to get some clues on what Mike McCarthy and Kellen Moore are thinking. You better know those players, because you weren't going to know if there's no name and there were no numbers.
Wow.
So there was no tell as to who's a starter or who's secondary. On and on and on and on. He's definitely changing the right out of the gate some culture change, and I think that's needed. And to your point, now we need to see how that translates in terms of game day prep and what kind of offensive system they're going to run. And is Mike ready to do the second act of his career? Or was what we saw in the last few years in Green Bay what we're going to get? So, as a Cowboy fan, I will tell you, I hope it's what you say, time will tell.
Well, I mean, planning it and implementing it are two different things. But I will be shocked if the planning is not modern. Because, again, he's going to make the biggest jackass out of himself in the history of the world if he trots out the same playbook as he had in Green Bay after all this big talk about, I took the time away and I refreshed myself and I understood modern concepts. And so, yeah, I mean, I think the approach is going to be there. We'll see what the execution is. And there's good reason to feel that the execution is going to be strong. It may just, again, be a thing of having to outscore the other team on a pretty consistent basis here based on how many stops you can get defensively. I do understand some of your questions about Philadelphia, because especially at the skill positions, there's been a little bit more of a question mark than we're used to seeing. They are still sort of acclimating in the new era at running back here. As the guys that led the team to the Super Bowl are not there anymore. Wide receivers really been sort of a turnstile over the last year or so. But again, one way or another, they always seem to get guys to be able to step up enough here. Defensively, again, I expect them to be fairly strong. And I'm going with them as my divisional winners. I have Dallas just missing the playoffs at 9-7. I have Philly winning the division at 10-6, and it's a matter, as I look at it here, of I've got them getting to the second round of the playoffs, but I was looking at some odds today on CBS Sports where they were looking at teams that are potentially underpriced for a deep run. I will say this, I mean, I don't think there's any super deep sleepers in the NFL this year, teams that are thought to be downtrodden that have a big run in them. I just don't see that. But if you're looking at that next tier or the one below that, wherever you slot the Eagles, again, if you're looking for a team to go to the Super Bowl where you can get a decent price on them, the Eagles would be my pick. I don't think they'll make the Super Bowl. I don't even think they'll make the NFC Championship game. But from a gambling perspective, I kind of like them as far as what the price is likely to be.
Well, my issues with the Eagles are multifold. I have them. We literally have Dallas and Philly flipped. I have Dallas at 10-6 and Philly at 9-7.
Okay.
I think the first thing is can Carson Wentz get through the season healthy? That's the first question mark for them, and that's even a bigger question mark because the offensive line is right now.
True.
I think that's gonna manifest itself in bad ways as the season goes on. The fact that they're bringing in Cordy Glenn now to try to check him out as they're making cuts on the roster, getting ready for Saturday's cut down. I think that's gonna be the biggest problem for the Eagles. And despite the fact that they picked up Darius Slay, I'm still not particularly thrilled with their secondary at this point. So I think that they've got some issues. I agree with you. The defensive line, linebackers, great stuff.
Yep.
But I think that running game. I think that they had a couple of opt-outs at wide receiver, but they had 4 pass guys. Man, they could field the track team, starting with Sean Jackson. The receiving core is still a little bit weaker than the Cowboys to me. Can Wentz stay healthy? I worry about that with that suspect offensive line at this moment, and that's just why I downgraded them. Just below the Cowboys. Going into the year. If those two ended up flipped, it wouldn't shock me, but I've got the Eagles at 9-7 and nipping at the Cowboys' heels all the way to the end of the season.
Yeah, I think we both agree that they'll be pretty close there. I will say, as far as Philly goes, I don't question what you're saying about the offensive line, because it really did sort of, I think, peak right around the time of their Super Bowl run, which is not coincidental in that regard. The one thing I will say is Doug Peterson running a system that is basically a close descendant of what used to be there under Andy Reid. You go back to the days when they had Westbrook back there, and the Eagles always could use that short passing game to keep the other teams a little bit off balance here. So like you said, in terms of what you have at wide receiver, in terms of the speed at running back, whether it be running bubble screens or whatever, there might be other ways of being able to work around that offensive line. Doug Peterson's a creative enough guy that I think that that may not hurt them quite to the degree that it might other teams.
No, I agree. And it's the continuity and quality of coaching is a benefit to them, where that is a question mark now in a place like New York.
Yeah, well, and I love when you set me up for segues that aren't...
That's what I do, man.
Well,
That's
yeah.
what I do.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna, I'm just gonna say it. I am that damn good at generating them, but sometimes I need a little help, and you gave me the assist I needed right there, because when you look at the Giants, that whole thing to me, and we've heard some good things coming out of camp, but it's hard to know what to make of these things. It's hard to know how much of this is just the usual press puffery and whatever about how Judge Joe Judge is doing there in New York. But the way that he got there, to me, was just sort of classic Giants bumbling, the way that they've been the last couple of years. The whole thing where they were really, really chasing Josh McDaniels, and Belichick is all like, no, here's the guy you really want. And they're all like, well, gee, thanks, Mr. Belichick. Thanks for pointing us in the right direction and away from the guy we thought we wanted. And they end up with him, a guy that nobody else was even kicking the tires on. Now, I go back to when you had Doug Peterson getting hired by the Philadelphia Eagles, and FDH Lounge dignitary Joe Stazak was bemoaning on this show that the Eagles had gone after a guy nobody else even talked to, whereas my Cleveland Browns were able to land Hugh Jackson. So you never know. Some of these takes may not age well, but this is a classic. Yeah, it's a classic example. Nobody else was looking at this guy. The Giants better be right. That's what happens when you go out on a limb. You better be right. The Eagles were right, and the Giants better be.
Well, it's gonna cost Dave Gettleman his job. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
Because he went off script. He went on the guy that, to your point, no one else was looking at. I mean, Joe Judge was being looked at for a couple of college teams.
Right.
And so I wasn't one of the Mississippi State maybe that was looking at him.
I think so. Yeah.
I mean, there were a couple of sort of mid-level Power 5, and he just they snatched him up and tossed him in there, and we all thought they were going to make this big move for Matt Rule, and they didn't even do that. So to your point, sink or swim with Judge. I mean, I'm hearing good things like you are. He certainly is sort of an old school guy. He's clearly, again, the warning bells. He seems like he's already like every other Belichick protege. He's trying to, channel his inner Bill right out of the gate, and it's like, boy, we've seen this before.
Right.
So that is a little worrisome. But I do love the fact that they upgraded their offensive line by taking the left tackle out of Georgia, who I was a big fan of, as you know.
Yes.
I would, if he'd been there at 10 for the Browns, I would have grabbed him in a second because he was a 3-year starter in the SEC, 2 years of dominating at left tackle in the SEC.
Right.
Do I think he has a higher ceiling than Jedrick Wills, who, for example, who the Browns did take at 10? No, I don't. But I think the floor is higher. Like, you know what you're getting in Andrew Thomas. He's going to be the 12th best left tackle in the NFL for the next decade. And, for some teams, like, that's, hitting a double is good enough.
Right.
Like, just don't try to overthink the room. Get a solid double, get a man on base. My sports head, of course, here. That's what Andrew Thomas is. He's going to be a solid guy. He's going to help keep Daniel Jones upright. Jones struggled a lot with pressure in the pocket and strip sacks, especially last year.
Yeah.
And, if you keep defenders off of him, I think Jones has a chance to be a good quarterback. At least he's shown some things. So they clearly, they've got their running game in Saquon Barkley, although I'm not the fan on Saquon that others are. To me, he is the consummate, he runs, 18 rushes in a game, 16 of them are for 1.5 yards, and then 2 of them are for 50 yards and 40 yards. And then we say, wow, how amazing he was. And that's what he is. He's a home run hitter. Otherwise, you get 2 yards out of him. So, I mean, they have the running game. They've got some real questions on defense and sort of no identity on that defense at all. And so I just can't see the Giants going beyond, say, like 5-11 this year. Despite some positive elements in terms of the things they're starting to build there, especially on the offensive line, they've got a ways to go. Just don't have enough, in my opinion, to compete over 16 games and to make the push for the playoffs.
Yeah, and I'm higher on Barkley than you are, and I would connect a lot of that to the problems with the line. And I think that the improved offensive line this year after they've made the investment, I think that'll help somewhat with getting Barkley to be more consistent. As far as Danny Dimes goes, I mean, I don't know. The guy, he just, to me, has not a very high ceiling. I don't see him being a consistently good quarterback in this league. So, sort of a homeless man's Eli Manning, I guess, is what I see when I look at him, which is sort of apropos when you look at their recent history as far as somebody who only sporadically could get it done at high levels. But I'm not impressed with, they have a lot to further to go in terms of the rebuilding of this team. Having Gettleman as the GM doesn't help matters. And this is a thing where you just look at, I mean, the Giants to me are one of the great enigmas of the 21st century, not just in football, but in society, I would say. One of the great enigmas, Chris Galloway, because, I mean, Jerry Reese in 2007. I mean, I'm not saying that was the second coming of the 74 Steelers draft, but you had 7 guys that you hit on that helped you to win the Super Bowl the next season. And that guy got off to a hell of a start. And then it just was a slow fade from there with the Giants' talent acquisition. And again, they had enough to get it over the hump a couple of years later. Eli Manning, I always used to say that that guy never seemed to get his game going until the Iowa caucuses kicked in. His team was usually eliminated, and it wasn't in presidential years when he would be in the playoffs other times. But, I mean, they were a weird team. They really were. They had 2 Super Bowl wins despite not having dominant teams either season. And it's hard to know what to make of them. I mean, if you want to say, it's hard to say that a team that's won 2 Super Bowls in 15 years has not been a very successful team, because any of us with our own teams would kill for that. But they just, those were sort of isolated moments of glory, and it gives the franchise.
They almost feel like the Florida Marlins of the NFL in that regard.
Don't they? Yeah.
It's like there's a lot of suck, and then all of a sudden, like, wow, how can we win a World Series? And the next year, they suck again.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a really, really strange thing, because it's not like the Parcells years, where usually when a team is really strong over a period of time, you draw a straight line through on it. And the Giants, even when they had their success, were herky-jerky. And then as the Jerry Reese talent acquisition really hit the wall, that's where the team has bottomed out over the last couple of years. Having Dave Gettleman in there, who I understand is a nice man, that's going to keep you at a bottomed out kind of a stage right now. He had some isolated success in Carolina, but isolated is the word I would use. But yeah, I don't look for anything out of the Giants. I got them at 5-11. That would be the same record that I have the Washington, don't call them the Redskins, at 5-11. Although, having said that, when you look at this, and again, they're a team that's doing a lot of weird things, like, again, just very, very recently as we're taping here, cutting Adrian Peterson when they don't have much of a depth chart to speak of at running back. Nevertheless, though, it's a thing where as much as it's a dumpster fire with the Dan Snyder ownership, and I said a couple of years ago, by the way, that when Scott McCloughan left there, I said, look out. It's going to become the same clown show it was before. And you can trace the reassertion of it being a clown show to when that happened, when you didn't have an adult in the room making the picks and running things there. Ron Rivera, I'm sounding a much different tone about him than I am about Joe Judge, because that guy is proven as an NFL head coach. He had his ups and downs in Carolina. I happen to think that some of the downs were things that were out of his control. I.e. the talent acquisition, and he was somebody who had to deal with what Dave Gettleman was getting him there with the Panthers previously. Ron Rivera, I am much higher on than Joe Judge, at least at this point in time, till we see something out of Judge, and I'm going to go out on a limb and assume you agree with me on that.
I do, and I think Ron Rivera, to your point, is finally an adult of that franchise. He's not going to put up with nonsense.
Right.
And it's the discipline that team needs and that franchise needs right now. Now, obviously, the coach can only do so much. You can't fix the rest of the front office. You can't fix the owner. You can certainly, provide a balance against that and a weight. And I think I was just going to say it. But for the Redskins, it's a good hire for right now. I'm assuming they'll be the Washington Wolves or something next year. But I agree with you. He's stable. He's the kind of guy that, he's going to be there for the next 5 or 6 years. They're going to get better. There'll be a playoff run at the end, and then they'll run them out of town. It'll happen.
Yeah.
But for now, he's exactly what they need. And so that's one thing going in their favor. I think that by and large, they just don't have enough talent on both sides of the ball. Although they have some players. I mean, first of all, the two Buckeyes, right?
Right.
Terry McLaurin, and who's just like a speedster. They've gotten, they cut Adrian Peterson because they believe in the young running backs. They got a stable of them, and you've got Chase Young, who is just, that guy is going to just destroy people this year. He is a machine.
Right.
They've got parts and pieces, but there's still a lot of questions on Haskins. Is he sure enough? Is he prepared to lead a franchise? Is he prepared to be the starting quarterback? I think we saw some flashes in the last 6 games last year, where it seemed like he was maybe starting to apply himself. Stories out of the building were that he finally started to take it kind of seriously and prepare better towards the end of the year and started to reflect the games. So if he dedicates himself to the game, and he could be the answer for them, but that's still a huge question mark. And right now in that division, he would be your 4th ranked quarterback, in my opinion. certainly he has a ceiling where he could bypass Daniel Jones, but he hasn't shown it yet. So they have some pieces. They've got a new, better coaching staff, but with all the dysfunction, all the controversy, and all the nonsense surrounding that franchise, it's hard to believe that they have enough to do anything but finish last in the division.
Well, exactly, and Haskins, as you know from your boy Trubisky, the curse of the one-year starter in college, which, by the way, the fact that he was only a one-year starter when I was screaming the whole time about how overrated J.T. Barrett was, that's the big brown wet skid mark on Urban Meyer's record, sticking with him as long as he did. But the fact remains, Haskins only got 1 year there as a starter, and that makes it tough. I certainly like his odds better than I did a year ago when it was Jay Gruden in there with Washington, and we'll have to see how the development goes from here. And it's an offensive skill position group that is really in flux, which is going to make it harder for them. Defensively, I agree with everything that you said there, and that, from day one, I look for Chase Young to come in and be absolutely dominant. That's a guy where it strikes me like Chase Young, if you're going to be like a young, dominant pass rusher in the NFL, doesn't that sound like a hip-hop alter ego name that you would use for a player? But he was born with it.
Well, it's a great name, and forget, he's a better player. And I can't wait as an NFL fan to sit and watch him because he just impressed the heck out of me last year at Ohio State. And from what we've seen so far in the spring, in what we're hearing out of camp is not missing a beat.
Yeah.
Apparently he's a handful already. And so it would appear that he is going to have a Musa-like welcoming party to the NFL. I hope now. And look, I don't mean to, points about Haskins and a one-year starter agreed. But, and again, how much can you put into a stock when we haven't seen these guys at all? But the reports out of Redskins camp, and there I see I did it again, is that, and I'll be doing it for years, the same way I still call the Chargers in San Diego.
That's right. Me too.
The report out of Washington's camp is that Haskins has been really solid and good reports. So, if you feel confident in that, maybe these guys do have some pieces. And isn't it hilarious that it's basically their three best pieces are all Buckeyes?
It is kind of funny, although, again, I think Dan Snyder had some kind of personal connection, I guess, to the Haskins family. That accounts for it in that case. Young was a no-brainer to take where they took him. McLaurin was the one where it was like that didn't necessarily have to be in terms of him going there, but it worked out.
I'll be honest, I didn't agree with that pick. I was like, I didn't think that Terry was worthy of that high a pick.
Yeah.
And I was absolutely wrong. And obviously other teams would have agreed with me because they didn't take him either.
Yeah.
That's a pleasant surprise in that regard.
Look at how much better a dude is when he doesn't have J.T. Barrett thrown to him to go back to that particular point.
Well, to your point, look, it matters, right?
Yeah.
Quarterback matters. And like we've talked about in some of the other division previews, I weigh heavily in a quarterback league on who is your quarterback.
Right.
And, that's why right now Washington is in part pulling up the rear.
Right. And I will say also, too, going back to what you said, and this is a good way to sort of bring it full circle about Ron Rivera, where you said that, as good as he is, there are things that he can't control, like the front office. Well, I will tell you this, that part of the whole reconfiguration that they've had there in D.C. Was to dump Bruce Allen, who, he might have had some good moments in Tampa when he was paired up with John Gruden earlier in his career, but the entirety of his career there in D.C., here's a nerdy joke that only two people are going to get, and those people are you and I. His career in D.C., it was the equivalent of his brother George's Senate campaign in 2006. The two were identical.
Okay. Wow, there's a reference. And on that note, folks.
I am pantomiming a reach right now as we speak, but I'm very proud of coming up with that one, by the way. So, Larry, like you said, on that note here, we will wrap the 2020 NFC East. Thank you, Chris Galloway. Coming up next, it's the 2020 NFC North.